Photography LLC. Welcome our judge, Don Trednick. Don is the owner of Frozen Hiker Photographer LLC, which has a goal to help other photographers improve their photographic skills. Don began leading workshops and teaching classes in 2012. Prior to that, he was giving lectures and leading photo hikes in the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, something he still does today. Don's classes are offered through Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, Centennial School District Community Education, and Hot Sam's Photo Park. In addition, Don runs several location-based workshops each year. More information on all Don's classes and workshops can be found on his website, www.frozenhiker.com. Don's had photos published in publications, websites, calendars, and marketing materials. His photos have also been displayed in several gallery shows around Minnesota. He recently had photos on display at the Redwoods National Park Visitors Center and at the Biscayne National Park Visitors Center, the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, Fairview Ridges Hospital, and Vita Pizza. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll start our salon with the assignment images, which the assignment for this time was rule of odds. Sevens, we'll start with three ladies dancing.
Okay. So, yeah, so I thought this was, given the challenging light, this was handled really well. The photo is nice and clean, so it's not a lot of noise. So photographer did a really good job of dealing with some really challenging situations. Now, I would have preferred that the dancers were facing the camera. So the timing seemed a little bit off on this, where two of them have their backs to the photographer. I think shooting a burst, you probably would have had them in the right position. That I'm guessing that it's a lot like photographing birds and getting the wings right, is in terms of the timing, having that burst could really make a difference.
Okay, next we have Bloodroot 3. Jill, can you turn up the volume?
Yeah, so I like the flow on this. The three flowers are positioned nicely. I like the position of the leaves. Sharpness is good across the three. The thing that hurts a little bit is the background itself. There's just a little bit too much detail. I would have liked to have seen that blurred out, a little bit less depth of field. I think really would have made the flowers just pop a lot more, as opposed to pulling your eye around to the various things in the background.
Next is BLT dip.
You have to really like the expressions on this, and the exposure is really good. It looks like everybody's having a good time when I'm sure it's really, really cold. This is another one, timing just a little bit earlier. I think to get, maybe you'd have had two of them in the air. I think would have made for a little bit more interesting of a photo. Also, I think I would have liked the position of the camera if you could. It's hard to say how far that water went across, but to be just a little bit more over to the left, so that you don't have as much of that background coming in from the side, and you've got more of the motion coming directly at you. Next.
Next is chatter.
So nice interaction with the subjects. It's always good to have a little bit of a story. So I think that worked pretty well. The light on this seems to be pretty harsh. So I'm guessing this was probably taken probably middle of the day. So that's a little bit of an issue. There also seems to be just a little bit of over sharpening when I look around the head in that area. I see a little bit of artifact from that.
Here's Denver's skyline.
Yeah, really nice long exposure. And I really like when the clouds do that kind of thing. And I think the depth of field here was handled really well. The challenge I have is I'm not really quite sure where to look. And actually, my eye just wants to be with the clouds. And so that the buildings, I don't think really kind of make sense with the way that they're positioned. Again, it doesn't seem to really have that central subject.
Next is Devil's Kettle.
So nice long exposure here. I think that you handled the shutter speed really well. One of the things when I look at waterfalls and you're going for that silky look is to make sure that there's still some definition in the water and it's not just turned into just kind of a blob. And I think that was handled really well here. It's really kind of tough because it depends a lot on the water that's coming across and how fast it's flowing. But I think he did a really good job with the shutter speed. The scene itself looks like maybe it's a little bit oversaturated. Looks like it was raining, so that may have added to it. I might have actually brought the saturation down a little bit. There might also be a little bit of a white balance issue here as well. Not sure if that's the result of maybe there's some HDR with this or maybe the white balance was just off a little bit, but it does have a little bit of a off feeling to it.
Okay, here's Flamingos.
I really kind of like the nostalgic feel of this. And I think this one really comes down to the positioning of the elements. I think if you had them positioned more towards the left side, especially since you have two of them facing right, I think that would have helped a little bit. Also, that white bed frame on the left does tend to grab your attention, and it's not really adding to the photo. So I think I would have preferred if the camera was pointed just a little bit more to the right.
Horned Puffins Environmental.
Yeah, I like that the puffins are shown in their habitat. I think this also makes for a really good nature story. I like the positioning of them with respect to each other. I think that there is a little bit too much background, so it starts to take away. I think I'd like to see that cropped down a little bit. I don't think that all of the out of focus flowers in the back add a lot to it. I think it becomes more of a distraction and you almost lose the puffins. So I think if you crop down quite a bit, actually, I think it would help.
Okay, Hummer Trio.
So this is kind of an interesting effect. And I like the positioning of the birds. I like the different wing angle from the one in the middle to the one above and below. For me, the background gets a little bit confusing as to what that is coming down the left-hand side. And so I start spending all of my concentration on that as opposed to the three birds, which is where I think you really want me. So maybe not having the texture that you applied quite so strong, maybe going with a little bit more translucent texture. I think maybe that would help a little bit.
Here's Iridescent Trio.
There are really nice reflections here, and the positioning is pretty good of the three birds. I like the panorama crop, similar to what we saw earlier. This one, especially if you look at the back of it, you can see a little bit of those sharpening artifacts. Also, it does have that really harsh light hitting it as well.
Garner Blues.
So this one, the exposure is really good. Depth of field, I think, could be a little bit better. I like the repeating pattern that you have with the three butterflies. I think I would have liked them to be a little bit further to the right and towards the top, so that they're pointing down and there's room where they're pointing, as opposed to being in the middle with their heads almost being towards that lower edge, which is where they're pointing to. I think that would give a little bit more room. I think it would also eliminate a lot of that out of focus area in the background, which can be a little distracting.
Monarchs on Liatris.
The detail and sharpness is really, really nice on this one. Colors are really good. Exposure is handled really well. The thing about this one is there's just some things in the background that just start to grab, and it's really tough when you're shooting these kind of environments, because you've always got other flowers in the background, and they're going to just start just pulling your eye that way. Especially the one that creeps in a little bit on the right hand side. I don't know how much freedom you have to remove elements for photos that are entered into this font. I think I definitely would have removed that one. I think I would have also maybe tried to darken down the things that are going on over on the left hand side and above the top butterfly.
Dusk flowers.
Really challenging to get the depth of field right on these, and you did a really nice job on that. I like the soft light as well. I think that works really well. The only issue that I really have with it is the way that the stems, especially the one of the flower that's towards the front, is clipped off at the bottom. I think I would have liked to have seen that going more into the grasses. This might have been one of those where just taking 1 or 2 steps backwards, I think would have made a big difference in the photo.
3 jet skis, 3 banana boats.
So I like the fact that there's a lot of context to what you're seeing here. There's no doubt as to where you are. I think the positioning of the boats could be a little bit better, or the wave runners. Anytime you've got anything that's implying movement in a given direction, when that movement is right at the edge of the frame, that starts to take away from the image. So I think if the boats had been further back, so if you had moved yourself back, maybe, I don't know, maybe about 4 or 5 feet or so, so that the noses of the boats were coming in more towards the center of the frame. Then you had the banana boats way towards the edge, would help. You'd lose a little bit of sky doing that, but I think that's okay, because I don't know that the sky is doing a whole lot for this image. And I think really the main thing that you're trying to get across is the various watercraft.
3 little birds.
Yeah, I really like the idea behind this image. And before we started, if you saw my background, see I've got a number of these other types of things kind of hanging out. One thing I thought was kind of cool was just that little bit of plant or whatever that's coming up. I think that adds a little bit of a nice touch. The issue here, I think, is really around sharpness. So the front bird looks pretty nice and sharp. The other two look a little bit soft to me. I also think maybe more of a panorama crop would help as well, because the subject is so small. I don't think you need as much of the area under the railing, and you could probably eliminate a little bit of what's on top, but definitely the area below. I think you could eliminate quite a bit of that and have a much more successful image.
3 Mardi Gras revelers and 2 cigars.
So here's a situation where you're definitely working with some very challenging, very harsh light, but you handled it really, really well. And that's not easy, and it's not like it's something that you typically have a lot of choice over. You could tell from the sky, there wasn't a cloud in the sky that day. And these events are going to happen when they're going to happen. So you have to figure out how to do that. For me, I think that the real issue is that the subjects are just a little bit too tight in the frame. This would have been one that I'm assuming this is some kind of moving float. Maybe if you had caught them just like 30 seconds earlier, they'd be a little further back. There'd be a little bit more room that wouldn't seem quite so cramped within the frame.
3 swans.
Really nice action shot. I always try to capture some of these over in Hudson every winter, where you've got a little bit of a disagreement going on between the swans. So I really like the action. I think, for this one, if the camera was just a little bit lower, you're at a pretty low angle, but I think if you could have gotten even lower still, I think that would have helped. I also think if you had backed up just a little bit, again, just to give a little bit more room. I don't mind the way that the swan on the left is, but the two on the right are really, really tight against that edge. I'd like there to be just a little bit more room over there.
Tomatoes.
This is a really, really good example of showing just the right amount of sharpening. And I talk about this quite a bit actually in a number of the classes that I do, where you don't want your subject to look like it was cut out of another image and pasted in with really hard edges around it, especially if it's a round subject like this. So I thought that was handled really well. This is another one though, where just a little bit too tight in the frame. Would like just a little bit more room, for the subject to be in there, especially since it looks like you've got a really kind of interesting table or surface that they're on. I think I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that.
Soundscape 1.
So there is kind of a nice flow that goes between, you've got the steeple of the church, you've got the dome, and then you've got the elevator in the bottom. And so you've got those three kind of peaks, which helps your eye kind of move around the photo pretty nicely. This one has the feel of, well, there's two things. Both might be related to over sharpening, but there might have been use of the sky selection tool. And one of the things that I've noticed is you tend to get these outlines of things that pop up into the sky when you use that. And I can see it around the steeple, around the top of the building, over by it. I can see it on the tops of some of the other buildings where they meet the sky as well. So something to just kind of be aware of. You can fix it. It does take a little bit of tedious work going through and cleaning up those pixels right near the edges, but it can be done. There also seems to be, when I look at especially the buildings in the foreground, seems to be just a little bit of over sharpening. It's just a little bit crisper than what your eye would normally see. When you look at that, almost having a little bit of a sort of a grunge effect.
Willow flycatchers ready to fly.
This was also a really nice nature story. I like how they're grouped together like that. Sharpness seems to be an issue with this one, and it almost looks like, and I've seen this happen, that maybe you use like the Topaz sharpened AI, where it seems to pick up and do a nice job on some parts, but it does kind of a little bit of an odd sharpening On other parts, this kind of has that feel to it. And it's not, one thing that I've noticed is it's not predictable. You could have two shots of essentially the same subject. It'll work really well with one, and then the other, you'll get this kind of an effect. So not sure if that's what happened here, or if there was something else that was causing the blur, but definitely sharpness is a bit of an issue.
Okay, on to the 8s. We'll start with Black Swans by Melissa Anderson.
Yeah, so challenging subject, and the detail on the birds is captured nicely. One of the things that I didn't mention when we started is, so the monitor that I use is made by BenQ. It's designed for photographers, and it shows, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all the images. And so when the detail is really good, it's definitely something that you see with the monitor. And these really nice, you know, in terms of the detail. Maybe a little bit lower in the frame would have eliminated some of the bright spots along the bottom. So I think that would have helped a little bit, just to move them out of that center line. And then maybe I would have just used the dust removal tool to just remove some of those, whatever those things are floating in the water. Almost looks like might be feathers or something, but I might have cleaned that up a little bit too.
Here's Collecting Eggs by Ricky Van Dyke.
Yeah, I really liked just the feel of this one. I like the positioning of the eggs. The eggs themselves do look to be a little bit over sharpened. So if you recall, I was talking about the tomatoes before. So in this one, you've got the really hard lines around the eggs. So it almost looks like you know, they were cut and pasted, you know, into the photo. And you get that effect when you do a little bit of over sharpening. Now, sometimes they come out of the camera that way. And what I find is actually reducing the sharpening can sometimes help with that, as odd as that sounds, because usually we're used to always sharpening, but sometimes you want to actually go the other way.
Here's Ground Cherries by Marianne Sir.
I really like the lighting on this, and also like the fact that each one is different. So you've got one completely closed, one that's open, one that has the fruit associated with it. I think you could probably remove about the bottom 15% or so of the frame. I don't think that's really adding anything to this. I think that would also kind of help with the balance. I think you were working on trying to maintain the shadows. I think that's, you know, maybe why it was set the way it was, but I don't know that the shadows, at least the shadow of that bottom one, gives quite as much. So I think if it were me, I'd maybe crop up just a little bit.
Here's Hepatica by Mike Schrun.
The depth of field is handled really nicely here. Anybody that's ever photographed flowers, especially wildflowers, that close up knows how challenging that can be, you know, to do this. So that's handled really well. I do wish that the flowers weren't so tight in the frame. Probably going to get a little tired of me saying that, I suppose, but I think this is another one we're moving back just an inch or two would have made you know, a nice difference. But the color is really spectacular here.
The Three Flamingos by Diane Herman.
Yeah, the placement is just amazing on this. I just I saw this. I just really enjoyed this photo, and the fact that you've got the one almost dipping its beak in, and you've got the others. You've got the eyes that are nice. I just wish that the bird on the right was just a little bit sharper. It's just a little bit soft. The other two are nice and sharp. I just wish that one was as sharp as the other two.
Okay, we're going to the nines. First is Double Trouble by Marge Springett.
Really nice action shot. I like the chase. I don't know if I've ever seen two of them chasing one. Usually I see one chasing one, so that was kind of cool. There's just enough separation to kind of see what's going on there. The detail in the wings is really nice, and anybody that's ever photographed these things knows how easy it is to blow out those details. So it's handled really nice. Would like to see just a little bit more room on the right hand side for the one to escape, but very nicely done.
Here's Waiting Out the Rain by Marianne Jerks.
Really nice nature story. Not quite sure if I ran into them, if I'd be a little bit worried. But I really like the use of the atmospheric conditions. It just kind of adds to the whole thing. So the rain in the background and all that, and hopefully you weren't too lost and they were thinking that maybe you were going to be their dinner.
Okay, the 10th. Darkroom Days by Chap Aiken.
Yeah, I just really like this one, and one of the big things here was that you've got a nice arrangement of elements, but it's not static. You've got the one spool that's tipped over, and it's very monochrome, but then you've got that film in the middle with the color, and it just draws your eye there and gives you that landing point, and then you start seeing all of the canisters and everything else, and just really nicely handled.
And finally, It's Mine by Don Speck.
This was just an amazing timing. Knowing Don, didn't know this was his photo, but knowing Don, it doesn't surprise me. I've seen this kind of thing from him before. Just yeah, just the perfect timing to get the birds positioned like that. They're not overlapping with each other. The action's coming right at you. You even got the eye of the fish looking good. Just very nicely done.
Okay, now we're into the creative category, and we'll begin with the 7s. The first one is Basketball Superstar.
So the different images here I thought were composited really well. I don't see anything that doesn't, or anything that looks kind of out of place with how they were composited. I think the texture that was used for the overlay, especially on the left side, needs to be softened just a little bit. It is a little bit distracting with how it covers that particular image of the subject. The other thing is with the main subject itself, there's a couple of issues there. One is there's a little bit of distortion, so the ball tends to look not round but more oval, and it would be better for this type of shot if the subject was actually looking towards the photographer as opposed to looking away. With these kinds of things, you do want that central, that main subject to be looking more towards the camera, have the action coming towards you.
City Development.
Really like the high key approach to this. I think that the issue here is really more with the trees that are on the left-hand side, because you have this really nice balanced high key. I even like the distortion that's in it, but I've got this line that leads me directly to those trees on the left-hand side, and so I end up getting stuck over there. I think actually if you just crop those trees out, I think this would be a much more successful image. I think you'd want to crop from the upper left coming down, so you still have that shadow and everything maintained at the bottom of the frame.
Here's Elsie and Bessie are not ready for Cirque du Soleil.
So kind of an interesting abstract of the Chick-fil-A cows. There's a couple of things that are a little confusing, and once you see them, you kind of get stuck on them. And one is the, I guess it'd be called the shoulder, the right shoulder of the upper one. I can't really tell if like part of the cow is there and the bricks for some reason are showing through, or what's really going on. But there's something going on there that just needs a little bit of cleanup, and then the lines that extend into the cows too is a little just a little bit confusing.
Hummingbird feast.
Yeah, I like the pattern and the textures that were applied to this. I think they do a really nice job with it. I think I would have liked the processing on the hummingbirds to be a little bit more consistent, and maybe along the lines of what's going on with the one that's on the left. So the one on the left seems to have a little bit more of a painterly type feel to it. The one in the middle is a little bit more realistic. And then the one on the right is somewhere in between. The other thing is the one in the center, the composite, bringing that one in, especially along the tail feathers, and that needs to be just a little cleaner so you don't have that line showing where it was put into the photo.
Ranunculus abstract.
Yeah, this was, I think, a good starting point, but I think it needs just a little bit more transformation to be in the creative category. I also think that, the area in the bottom isn't adding as much. I think all the flow is up on this one. And so I think if you moved that center part of the flower down and had a little bit more of the flow coming up, I think that would also help. But I would like to see just a little bit more with this being in the creative category.
And state of comfy.
So really nice interaction between the cat and the photographer. And I like the close-up nature of this. But this is another one that I don't think really fit within the creative category. This one to me seems much more pictorial. I think it would have probably made more sense to be in that category instead.
On to the nines. Eagle with lunch.
I really like this one. And one of the things that I've judged this kind of category before in other clubs, and one thing that I've kind of learned from this is, for these kind of shots to be successful, you have to start with a really sharp, well exposed photo. And that's exactly what happened here. And so you're then able to apply these kind of effects to it, and it looks really good. So really like this image.
And that's Don Speck's photo. Sorry for the omission. Next we have Positano Italia, Chap Aiken.
Yeah, this one, the choice of texture for this was just perfect. It really gives, this looks like something that would be hanging in a museum somewhere. The only criticism I would have is I don't know that you need the vignette that was applied, or at least not as heavy. I kind of get what you were trying for with it, but nicely done. I enjoyed looking at this one.
Finally, our 10, Hogwarts Osprey by Melissa Anderson.
This was just an amazing, just an amazing image. I have no doubt you could probably sell hundreds of this without any problem at all. Just everything is very well executed. Position of the bird, the little things in the background, everything complements everything else nicely framed. Yeah, just really nice job.
Okay, we're going to start with nature. First, the 7s. Big boar eating sedge grass.
So here it's a really nice nature story. I think the position of the subject and its relationship to the rest of the environment doesn't quite work. I know one of the things when you're photographing bears is you don't want to get too low, but I think that being said, I think if the camera were a little bit lower, I think that would help. I think you tried to bring in too much of the background. I kind of get that, but I don't think that that's really helping as much. I think not having as much of the background would actually help. Maybe if it was just the pine trees in the back, a little bit more of a panorama crop, that would help.
Food face osprey.
Well, you don't get much better in terms of interaction with the photographer than you have here. Hopefully you weren't the food. I do like the bits of food on the beak. I think that's a nice touch. I think there's a little bit of a sharpness issue here. The beak, one of the eyes is a little bit soft. And then also with the body being closer than the head, you really kind of need to be careful of both the sharpness there as well as the brightness. And so while the eyes and beak certainly get your attention initially, you do eventually end up wandering down towards that bright area of the body, end up being stuck down there. So I think I would have preferred to have that maybe not be quite as bright and definitely sharper.
Okay, we've got golden pond black-bellied duck.
Yeah, so the position of the duck I think is really good. Maybe could be just slightly higher in the frame, but that's probably just a little bit of a nitpick. I think here, the issue is really along the lines of the subject is just a bit soft, and the way it is soft, I'm almost wondering if maybe there were some noise issues that were trying to be corrected here. A little bit too much noise reduction resulted in the softness of the image.
Hawk.
Really nice, strong image. The crop is really good. This image suffers from some technical issues, which I don't notice as much now as I did when I was looking at before. But there is, if you look just above the beak, you'll see that there is some kind of a large dust spot right there. There's also another one directly above the head. So those definitely could have been cleaned up a bit. There's also a little bit of sharpening artifact around the beak in that, and also around the front part of the chest of the bird as well.
Long-eared owl.
So the eyes on this are just fantastic. They definitely grab your attention. That part is done really well. This is another one where I think having sharpness in the body or the lack of sharpness in the body actually hurts the image a little bit. And I think a lot has to do with the fact that because it is bright, it just does need to be a little bit sharper. Everything else is handled really nicely.
Monarch.
Nice angle. I like the I like the positioning. I think a little bit more depth of field would have definitely helped. Looks like the camera locked focus on the front wing, which is making the rear wing a little bit soft. I would have liked to have seen that part sharp as well. I think that would have really helped quite a bit.
Nesting chickadee.
So good nature story. There's a little bit of a sharpness issue around the beak. Also think that this subject is really too tight in the frame. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more room around the bird. And, I think that would have definitely helped, quite a bit. And that lower left area, I'm not quite sure what is actually going on there, but it is a bit distracting. Found myself concentrating more on that, trying to figure that part out than the rest of the photo.
Northern pintail.
Angle and the lighting on this are really nice, and I really like the way that the background is blurred out. There are some sharpening artifacts on this one as well, which is a little bit of a distraction. And let's see, what else do I have there? Oh, and then also having just a little bit more room for the bird to fly into as well.
Pair of bluebills, sorry.
It's kind of funny because when I first read it, when I was going through these, I had bluebells hit. And maybe it's because I've got some growing outside my window, but yeah, it's funny how your eyes do that sort of trick sometimes. I like the interaction between them. I like that the one in the front's looking at the one in the back. And the patterns in the water, I think, are a really nice complement to the two birds. But there does seem to be a sharpness issue with the birds themselves. It looks like this is a case where the camera grabbed focus on the water in front of them. And so we're already starting to lose that depth of field as we get to the birds themselves.
Ruddy duck.
Nice colors. Exposure here is handled well. Really challenging subject with that white cheek and the very dark head. So I think that was handled really nicely. There are some sharpening artifacts, here as well, especially you see it along the tail feathers along the back. And yet at the same time, the body in that of the bird is relatively soft. So I suspect that this was one that maybe was tried to be saved a little bit too much from being out of focus.
Wood duck pair.
Yeah, so some nice detail in the wood ducks. Really like the males. I think they really have a lot of interesting color and patterns and that in them. This one, I'd say, the biggest thing is it just suffers from just a lot of contrast and brightness. Probably a time of day thing, but especially just with the busyness of the back. The background, and then just the contrast in that within the ducks themselves.
Okay, the 8th. First, we have Brown Crested Flycatcher by Melissa Anderson.
Yeah, really nice timing on this one. I really liked it. I liked a little bit of blur in the wings that gives a little bit of motion. I do wish there's something in the very front in the lower part of the image, right underneath the bird. I don't know if that was a plant sticking up or what, but there's a big blurred out area there that I really wish wasn't there. But I really like the timing of this one.
Prairie Chicken in Morning Light by Diane Herman.
Yeah, I've always wanted to photograph these guys. And then I never get around to it. Really like the camera angle. This is, exactly the kind of thing that you want. Right at the eye level, positioned, very nicely in the frame. I think the background could maybe use a little bit of noise reduction, a little bit of cleanup there. But the interesting thing is this is the kind of photo that if you printed, having that little bit of noise would actually help, would actually give you a nicer print. Foreground grasses, kind of wish they weren't there. Kind of understand that, you had to be at a low angle to get it, but they're a little bit distracting. So I do wish that they weren't quite there.
Prairie Chicken Territorial Dispute by Betty Bryan.
Yeah, love the action. And this is a really good example when I talk about, giving room for the subject, so that there's plenty of room for the one that's flying in. Interaction between the two birds. Maybe could have eliminated a little bit of the area on the left, but I think it still works the way that it is. I think I would have maybe tried that though, a little bit, maybe going with a 8x10 crop. I think might have helped a little bit.
And the 10s? Kelp Goose by Marianne Sear.
This is just really, really nicely done. Really like the colors of the background and how they complement the bird and the detail in the feathers, the positioning of the feet. Just everything about this one was just executed really nice. The reflection works really well. Just really, really nicely done. Just a nice, clean image.
Do you need a break, Don?
Nope, I'm doing good. You weren't too bad. You only had, I think, 72 compared to some camera clubs that give me like 120.
All right. So do you want to push on then, or you want to take a brief 5-minute?
Yeah, we could take a quick 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll set my timer. Come back in 5. Maybe I'll set my timer.
Do you like his sports card?
Yes. I printed it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't either. Well, it's coming from the box. So, okay. So if next time we do this, maybe we should connect it. Oh, the computer is connected to the. Really? Bluetooth?
Yeah, oh yeah, those kids are, then he's got a pair that are with white boots. So, they'll show up. So, also, exactly. Sometimes that's the only way I know it.
I just want to tell you, I changed the name of your photo. You have some weird number in here.
Oh, really?
Like, this course came back from the judge and I was going through, and I put these little codes in. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? Well, I had
So it was the last. Well, sometimes I get really.
And I don't remember. But these ones.
Oh.
And I started doing that. to see if something.
Yeah, and the old number, you know, I can't see hard if you have. Well,
So
you
it's just
know,
funny
it
about
was-
it. We have to give her a hard time about it.
So I thought I'd tell you, Tasha Shu. She is my cousin's daughter.
Oh, really?
My dad is grandfather there. We're brothers.
I don't know if we were talking about, it. I just read it.
I read her.
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay,
So she got a sign back.
sure, yep.
And I was like, you always want your report, and I never did. And I got my stepdaughter. In high school with her, I knew she was behind her or something. Okay, so I remember when we.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she always was kind of, you know, in center stage.
It is, yeah. I mean, that girl.
can't
Yeah.
just lighting and
Yeah.
white down.
Yeah.
It's not something I would
Yeah,
I'm guessing it's
Oh,
Yeah,
something-
the rest was that.
that's right. Yeah,
Setup.
it's hard to hear him,
Oh, okay.
you know, but maybe they should all move up.
Yeah, I turned my computer up to 100,
Yeah.
but I don't
Well-
think I'm controlling the sound.
That's probably not.
Next
It's a little
time.
difficult Hearing him, but I know, you know, there's only so much you can do.
And I think next time we'll just, pull the audience chairs up closer or
I
something,
think that might be.
so they have to sit closer
a
to
little
the
closer
thing.
or something.
I don't know.
So, but, you know, it is.
Right, and we have the recording. Thank you for remembering that.
That's something I remember, yeah.
It's like there's so many things to do.
Are we gonna continue to do the hybrid? Hours a year,
It's a kind of a big thing.
yeah,
I'm gonna have a board meeting soon and discuss. As to.
oh, okay.
The images show up better on your computer. I've been comparing tonight. And they really lose a lot of sharpness on the screen. But
Turnout, it looks like.
how many people did we end up with? Oh, okay, that's pretty good. I haven't been paying attention to the counts on the other meetings.
Last meeting.
Yeah.
You don't know. Until you try.
Mhm.
Oh, is it?
Okay.
Silence, so I couldn't hear it. Funny thing about it. Okay.
Are you ready to continue?
Yep, I'm all set.
All right. So the pictorial candidate, will start with the sevens.
Okay.
First one, Andy.
Okay, so nice action shot, and this is another one, you know, did a really good job of dealing with some pretty challenging light. You can see those shadows are almost going directly straight down. Again, this is kind of the reality of shooting these types of sports is you have to work with the light that you did. And you did a really nice job with that. You know, in this case, the action is really moving out of the frame. It would have been nice to have had them a little bit more towards the right-hand side. I think it also would have been better if the ball was a little bit lower, closer to the ground, closer to one of the feet, as opposed to being up where it is. This is another situation we're shooting in a burst. because it is really tough to anticipate that. But shooting in a burst, I think, would have helped as well.
Okay. Here's before the destruction.
Yeah, I like the idea behind this. I think this is a case of a very small space and trying to shoot with a really wide angle, which causes a lot of distortion, which can be a little bit confusing to the viewer. Also really wish that that radiator wasn't there, because that tends to grab your attention. And it takes away from the rest of the photo. So I think it either needs to be, there needs to be more, or it doesn't need to be there.
Here's caught in motion.
This is another one where the detail and the exposure of the bird is handled really well. Really like that you can, literally count the feathers. I think the subject here is a little bit too centered and is a little bit too high in the frame. And sometimes this happens because we become very wrapped up in trying to make sure we've got all of that reflection, or as much of the reflection as we can. And I don't think that was really needed for this one. So I think if you had the subject a little bit lower in the frame, maybe with the bottom of the bird where it touches the water being about maybe 20%, 25% up from the bottom of the frame, I think that would have helped quite a bit.
Okay, here is flow.
So I do like the leading lines. It brings you back to the bridge, so you get a little bit of a reward for that. The light itself is really flat, and I think that hurts this image. There also seems to be, when you look at the rocks that are coming in from the left-hand side, the sharpness in that seems to almost be a little bit out of place with the rest of the image. And so that becomes a little bit of a distraction as well.
Here's just stretching.
So the head, the beak, nice and sharp. The crop, I think, is really nicely executed here. I think the shadows maybe could be brought up a bit. The body itself of the bird, I think, could be a little bit sharper. I think that would help as well. And I'd also like to see a little bit of a catch light in the eye, just to give a little bit more life to the subject.
Malibu sunset.
Yeah, I love the colors in the sky. Definitely, there was a great evening going on. Needs to definitely be some cleanup. You can see the number of dust spots, actually quite a few in the sky, so that certainly could use some cleaning as well. Also think there needs to be a little bit stronger subject. Not really quite sure where exactly you want me to be looking in this. So, if it was a boat or something out there, or some birds, or, it just needs something to act as a little bit of an anchor.
Mesa arch.
Yeah, nice tonal range here. I think it's really good. I like the warm colors on the underside of the arch. This is the shot that you want to get when you go there. There's definitely some technical issues going on. If you look at the very top corner, you can see there's some really strong, I'm guessing that's a sharpening artifact. Could be a little bit of chromatic aberration. Looks like there might be some towards the bottom of the arch where it meets the sky as well. Also wish that the sky itself wasn't as blown out in the back. Would have liked to have seen a little bit of detail in the sky back there.
Superior Sentinel.
It's a nice dramatic sky. One thing I really like is the fact that you have a person in the frame. So that does add a little bit of scale, also adds a little bit of story to the photo. So I really like that. I think the area in the foreground is a little bit too prominent, probably from using a really wide angle lens and being relatively low. Sometimes if you can get up higher, you can eliminate a little bit of that effect. And then also looking out towards the lighthouse, you do see some of those sharpening artifacts out there as well.
Tombolo.
Yeah, this was just a great place to be shooting this winter. I spent some time up here myself. Like all the little details and all of the icicles coming off of the rocks in the foreground. The snow and ice on the tombolo itself is blown out a bit. So we lose a lot of detail there. Same thing with where it wraps around on the front of the trees. So I would have liked to have seen maybe the exposure brought down a little bit when capturing this to get all of that interesting detail in those in the ice with the way it's wrapped around the trees and coming down the front.
Soundscape.
So image has a nice balance, very similar to the one we saw earlier. So some of the same issues we see in this one as well in terms of the sharpening artifacts along where it meets the sky. Could also be a sky masking issue as well. And then just over sharpening and maybe some saturation issues too, especially in the lower part of the image.
Tree.
I like the framing of this. I like the way the elements are distributed. The layers are really nice. I think that was handled really well. I think the angle works well with the position of the tree. The only thing that I would say is I just wish the image itself were sharper. It's almost universally soft. Maybe that was the intention behind it. But for myself, I do wish it was a little bit sharper.
Wood ducks.
So here's another one. We're just getting that nice low angle of position. I don't know if you were in the water in waders or shooting from a kayak or a canoe, but just really nice camera angle. The male is really nice and sharp. I wish that the female was also sharp, but there's a little bit of softness there. Most likely a depth of field issue. Looks like the camera locked onto the male, and because the female's positioned a little bit further forward, she's not quite as sharp.
On to the eights, we have Roxy by Ricky Van Dyke.
Yeah, I really like the textures on this, both with the fur and I don't know if that's burlap, whatever that material is. The eye is amazing. The eye and the nose are handled really well. There's a little bit of a noise issue as you get towards the far side of the face. So would like to see that cleaned up a little bit, but you almost have to be looking for that to see it, because the rest of the image is just so strong. Your eye just never even really goes back there. And I think this was one that if I wasn't judging, I probably wouldn't have even have noticed that.
The nine. Flipping Hair by Fred Sabatka.
So the light, the timing, even the reflection in the water all works really well. Everything comes together nicely with this. The only little bit of criticism I would have is that the hand in the center of the frame is held just a little awkwardly. I don't know if there's a better position that she could have had her hand in, and would have looked just a little bit more natural.
Franz Joseph Land Seascape by Mary Ann Sear.
Yeah, really strong subject. Like the positioning of all of the elements, plays well. The sky actually kind of matches it a little bit. I think the middle part of it really complements the icebergs really well. Might crop down a little bit from the top. I think once you get to about the top, maybe 25% of it, I don't know if that needs to be there. So maybe a little bit of a panorama crop, might help. But yeah, definitely a lot of interest. Done really well.
Okay, Salton Sea Chair by J. Olson Goody.
I really like this shot. One of the things they say is a good photo really engages the viewer, and this one definitely does. Your mind just starts working, as to, why is that chair there? What's the story behind that? And you just start thinking, all these different kinds of stories that could happen. So it just really keeps you engaged. The only thing I would say is, maybe the water, in the sky could be a little bit lighter. Looks like there could be a little bit of an issue from having a little bit of a wide angle lens and having a polarizer on it. Not really quite sure, but you even see a little bit of banding coming in on the left-hand side, but it's just such an engaging photo.
Taking Flight by Mary Ann Jerks.
This is another bird photo where the timing is just amazing. Just right after the takeoff there, I think the air fern adds a nice little balance touch to it as well. So yeah, just really, really nice.
And the tens. First, we have Bristlecone Pine, Bryce Canyon by Chap Aiken.
Yeah, this was actually my favorite photo of the entire salon. Just really well executed. I like the fact that you let the sky in the background just blow out. Works really well. There's a little bit of texture in the snow. It's nice and white, and then you just have that really nice contrast with the tree and how it just pops, just right off. Just really, really well done.
And our last one, Low Skater by Fred Sabatka.
Yeah, really nicely executed. I like the positioning and the fact that you've got the lines in the ice from her fingers that they just draw you right over to her. I don't know how you get in that position to actually skate like that. I think my leg would probably fall off if I tried to do that, but really, really nicely done. Weight balance is handled really well, which can also be a huge challenge when doing these kinds of shots. So just nicely done.
Okay, well, that's all we have for tonight. Thank you again, Don. We really appreciate your thoughtful comments and the time you took to judge our images. Everybody stay tuned to your email for next month's meeting. That's going to be our scavenger hunt. And do you have anything else? You have to end it.